Hello and welcome to the Circular Economy Show, where we dive into how we can and are accelerating the transition towards a circular economy. My name is Laura, and in this episode, we are going to explore the role of businesses in tackling biodiversity loss and how the circular economy is key in achieving this. Biodiversity, as a term, encompasses the whole variety of life on Earth. People tend to think that biodiversity covers mammals, fish, flowers, and plants, but what they often forget is that it also includes algae, plankton, ecosystems, and of course us, people. Did you know that 1 teaspoon of soil includes more living organisms than there are people on Earth? Another thing that is overlooked is the dependence that we have on biodiversity. When biodiversity thrives, so does the world's economy and the businesses that rely on it. The World Economic Forum estimates that over half of the world's total gross domestic product, or GDP, around $44 trillion, is dependent on nature and the services it provides. However, biodiversity is under threat. Our current linear economy has played a big role in taking us where we are now. My colleagues Maya and Cindy tell us more about this.
So Cindy, could you tell us about how our current economic system contributes to biodiversity loss?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that we produce the products and services and use them in our economies today is a huge contributor to the biodiversity loss we see. In fact, research has found that 90% of biodiversity loss globally and 50% of all greenhouse gas emissions are a direct result from our production and consumption systems. This is a huge impact on the way that our economy works. And this is largely because we operate currently in a linear economy. So that means that we're taking resources from the ground, we're making products out of them, and then very quickly afterwards, we're discarding them. And at every stage of this, we're having an impact on nature. So when we take things, we're altering land, ocean, disrupting a lot of habitats, but we're also overexploiting a lot of the resources that we need. Then when we make things, we're generating a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions. And as we waste them, we provide a huge amount of leakage into the environment of different pollutants. And so the way that we're currently operating really isn't tenable in the long term. We're already using up around 1.6 planet Earth's worth of natural resources for the products in our life. And, as we know, we only have one planet Earth. So if we're really going to address this 90% of loss, yes, we need conservation and restoration efforts. We need to plant trees and we need to clean up ecosystems. But we also fundamentally need to tackle how our economy works, how we manage land, produce and consume products and food.
All right. So how does, in light of all of this, how does a circular economy address biodiversity loss?
Yeah. Well, the circular economy is fundamentally about rethinking the ways that we produce and consume things. It's about how can we move from this linear system that inherently degrades nature into a circular one that can work with nature, but even create positive benefits for it. And, the 3 principles are a way to do that. But if we think about the fashion industry, for instance, as an example, we see that a lot of the operations in that today cause harm to biodiversity. We can think about production processes like textile dyeing, which often uses a lot of toxic chemicals. And if those get into the environment, they can cause a lot of harm. But there are, circular solutions being adopted to address that. For instance, Colorifics is a company that's producing a completely bio-based dye, which allows us to have the same effect on your textile, but without any of the harmful chemicals. So it's really removing that threat entirely that could come from that. Then you can also think about different ways that we could keep the products and materials that we already have existing in use for longer. So, the textile industry or the fashion industry creates a lot of waste for a number of reasons. We have low quality materials often. Things go out of season very quickly. We don't really hang on to our clothes and items for too long. But if we think of different business models, for instance, that can help us circulate these existing products for longer, we drastically reduce the pressure to produce more. So, for instance, if we think of a cotton t-shirt, if every single cotton t-shirt in the world was used for twice as long as it is now, we'd need half the amount of land to grow that cotton needed for those t-shirts, which would mean that we have so much more room left for biodiversity to thrive on its own. And as part of that, we can also think about how we grow the materials that we use. So in the fashion industry, about 36% of fibers come from different renewable resources. So that could be cotton, viscose, wool, what have you. But a lot of the ways that they're grown today actually deplete the environments in which they're grown. So we use a lot of monocultures. We don't have a lot of diversity on the actual farms, for instance. Our soils get depleted. We have to use a lot of fertilizer, which can leak into the environment, cause eutrophication. And instead, in a circular approach, we think about how can we produce these materials in ways that regenerate those ecosystems in which they're produced. So how can we use more diverse crops, and how can we introduce more diversity of species purposefully onto the land, but also just create a healthier system where the soil is healthy, there is no toxic chemicals used, that actually attract beneficial species also to that environment.
So we have heard that the circular economy is a framework that looks at transforming the current economic system. It focuses on solutions that can move us from an extractive and wasteful economic model to a regenerative and restorative one. The first principle of the circular economy is to eliminate waste and pollution. Achieving this would reduce current threats to biodiversity. In order to eliminate waste and pollution, we need a mindset shift. We need to understand waste and pollution as what they are, design flaws. We need to ask ourselves in the design process, what is going to happen to this product at the end of its life? In many cases, we have to ask the very basic questions. Do we even need this packaging at all? When you eliminate waste and pollution through design, you are also protecting our natural ecosystems by keeping the waste away from these natural systems in the first place. Let's take a look at a few examples of businesses that are eliminating waste and pollution.
When you throw something away, where is away? There is no away. We live in a world with finite materials. Products are made cheaper and cheaper, disposable and more disposable on a daily basis. You take raw materials, you process the raw material, you make a product, then the consumer uses it for a certain amount of time, and then it's thrown in the bin.
Plastic bottles and ketchup sachets, you use them for probably a few minutes. And then the packaging is on the environment for several years.
Waste. Sheer, needless, unforgivable waste.
What we are offering is a new point of view of how to think about packaging and how to challenge the standards that currently plastic packaging is giving us. We are trying to match the shelf life of the product that is inside of the packaging with the shelf life of the packaging itself. Ojo, it's a membrane made of seaweed that is biodegradable and as well edible. You just consume it, and then the packaging won't be there for more than a few weeks.
Carpet only get 3% recycling rate these days in Europe, a little over 10% in some states in the US, but that's really where we are today, and it's not enough. What we try to do is design it from the start in a way that it can come back in the same product.
Once the consumer has finished using them, they can be taken apart and then put in the respective loops and processed and close the loop again and again.
We are looking at mattresses, carpets, furniture that is today made out of particle board, MDF or similar materials. Typically glues are made to make two different layers bond for as long as possible, the strongest possible. And after use you can never separate the two. It's a very sad story and it all ends up in landfill or it's burned. It took a bit of material science and smart thinking of my colleagues really to design a glue that could decouple after use very easily with a frequency signal. The mattress has a lot of material in it, so the residual value is pretty big if it's designed well. And of course for the manufacturers, it makes sense to know when I change my mattress or my carpet because then I'm in the market for a new product. And if you have mattresses for a hotel chain, and why not have a maintenance contract for those hotels to make sure that you have a constant quality. With our adhesive you can change different layers at different moments in time because it's not always glued together for eternity.
So we are working now on toiletries, putting together several trials with hotels where we will be able to deliver small volumes of shampoos and gels.
There's a lot of innovations out there that has not yet taken mainstream. And what is really important is to make sure that those innovations that can save us are taken and scaled up. This is, to me, the only way for us to fight climate change and to fight pollution, to fight waste.
And these innovations keep away the materials that would have otherwise found their way into natural ecosystems, reducing threats to biodiversity. So we've seen that businesses like loss.We are eliminating waste by eliminating packaging completely. Similarly, DSM Niaga are also eliminating waste by rethinking the way their products are designed completely, making them easy to break down for material recovery at the end of life. In the long run, both these actions protect biodiversity by preventing this waste from being created in the first place. The second principle of the circular economy is to circulate products and materials to leave room for biodiversity. This means that everything that we create has to keep circulating in the economy and out of the environment. Let's take a look at the fashion industry. Currently, large amounts of non-renewable resources, like plastics or synthetic fibers, are extracted to produce clothes that are often used for a short time. Around 99% of clothing materials are sent to landfills, incinerated, downcycled, or leak into the environment as microfibers. As a consequence, the fashion industry contributes to global biodiversity loss through the degradation of natural habitats and the pollution of air, water, and soils. Instead, a circular economy for fashion ensures three things. First, that clothes and fibers are kept in use. Second, a shift towards safe chemistry and the designing out of microfibers release. And third, that the materials are produced regeneratively. Keeping clothes and the materials they are made of in circulation reduces the need for new clothes or new products to be made. As a direct effect, it also reduces the negative impacts associated with virgin fibers production, processing, and disposal. But what does this look like in practice? Many businesses have chosen to adopt new circular economy business models. Let's have a look.
The fashion industry has become renowned for its wasteful, inefficient, and polluting practices. Clothing production doubled between 2000 and 2015. Yet the average number of times a garment is worn has decreased by 36%. So what are we doing about it? Let's explore some of the innovative startups applying new business models that decouple resource use from revenue growth to eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials, and regenerate nature. We all have clothes sitting unused in our wardrobes. ThredUp's reuse model is bringing thrifting into the modern world. Here's Samantha explaining who ThredUp are and what they do.
ThredUp is the world's largest fashion resale platform, and Our mission is to inspire a new generation to think secondhand first. We've done a lot of work over the past few years to work on removing the stigma around secondhand. There used to be some apprehension around shopping used clothes, but by reinventing resale on the internet and inventing this cutting-edge technology to process your clothing, to price it, to list it online, to make it really, really easy to find the perfect item that you're looking for, we've done a great job of eliminating that stigma and helping secondhand to go mainstream.
ThreadUp is helping users to circulate products and make better purchasing decisions. But what about products you've brought that become damaged whilst they still have life left in them? Josephine Phillips, founder of Sojo, is here to tell us more about their repair model.
Sojo, well, in a sentence, I would describe Sojo as like a Deliveroo-like service, but for clothing alterations and repairs. And essentially what that means is we connect customers to local seamster businesses through our app and bicycle delivery service so that people can get their clothes fixed or fitted with a few simple clicks. Now, we wanted to sort of like modernize the age-old, clothing tailoring industry. But our mission is really, really aligned with circularity and with sort of trying to make fashion circular.
So now we've seen how to circulate products and keep them in use. But everyone wants to own their clothes, right? Not necessarily. Hack Your Closet is changing the role of ownership by allowing users to rent clothing via a subscription. Michaela offers an explanation.
Well, Hack Your Closet is on a mission to reduce waste and prevent waste in the clothing industry. And we want to challenge ownership of clothes. So we do this by taking clothes out of the waste stream and prolong their use phase. It could be recommerce, it could be pre-loved secondhand items, but also overproduced clothes from different brands. And we match the style of those clothing items with our customers' style profile and send them 4 items each month that they can use for as long as they want before they return them to us. We always keep ownership of all the clothes and circulate them between our customers to make use of all the items for as much as possible.
What if you could wear clothes without them even existing? DressX is a digital clothing retailer that allows customers to buy digital clothing and render them onto images. The virtual clothes can be used by brands for influencer campaigns or for your own social media, and you can even purchase clothes that could never exist in real life. We've explored an array of B2C examples, and it all seems to make sense from the outside, but we can't forget the system in which they sit. What's enabling these repair, return, and leasing models? There has to be adequate infrastructure in place to facilitate the multiple transactions of clothing between users. And clothing has to be designed to withstand being used more and for longer. Imagine you are renting a shirt, but it has not been designed to withstand the amount of washing required, or it's not recyclable. Then it will end up in the landfill faster than if it were purchased by one person. The Renewal Workshop works directly with businesses to help them offer circular business models to users. Jeff explains how.
The Renewal Workshop exists to help brands become circular. And so really, we're focused on serving our brand partners to help transition their linear business models into circular business models. We do that in a number of ways. First, by helping them to develop the strategy behind switching over to a circular business model, which is incredibly challenging and difficult for a business that has been built for linearity. But then we manage the entire back-end operations for a brand, including all of the processing of the products that they deem as unsellable.
The third principle of the circular economy is to regenerate nature. Regenerating nature enables biodiversity to thrive. Imagine if we could go beyond doing less bad and actually have a positive impact on our natural ecosystems? Well, this is possible. For example, regenerative food production creates the conditions to achieve this by improving the health of soil, enhancing carbon sequestration, improving water and air quality, and eliminating the need for harmful synthetic inputs. These regenerative food production practices create the conditions for biodiversity to thrive both above and below ground. Up next, we're going to watch a few examples of how this is done in practice in Kenya.
Farmers in Africa are important to the economy, but also very exposed to climate change. Regenerative agriculture is farming practices that bring back destroyed soil in a way that makes soil healthy and productive, restores biodiversity, and improves nutrition. That's the future. There are 2 innovative farms in Kenya practicing regenerative agriculture. We have Tamaru using agroforestry and Farmer Max using livestock to regenerate soils.
The story about this farm is not just about chickens. It's about using chickens as a tool to regenerate soil. It was typical to any small farm. It was heavily grazed, it was tilled. We got in 100 chicks and it kind of evolved from that. Over many, many years, the ground was being used in conventional way of farming, which means that over time you have a loss in the microorganisms by tilling it. You're releasing carbon, which is food for the microorganisms. What we're trying to do is stop any disturbance in the soil and try and revitalize it by using livestock to fertilize the soil in a natural way. Conventional poultry farming is usually in confined houses where there's a batch of 3,000–4,000 chickens. Whereas what we do is we take away that pressure by shifting the coops. On the broiler pasture, we have a small dairy herd that we move about 10 days in front of the chickens, and they graze the grass down to about 6 inches. The patties are full of natural protein by the time the chickens graze over them, so it further substitutes their feed in terms of natural protein that they are able to forage and peck at on the ground. What they poop out is our resource for the soil. Their poop is high in nitrogen. They are fertilizing the soil. We are trying to rebuild ecosystem health, and it's effective. And then behind the chickens are the sheep that come in, who also maintain a sort of level of pasture where we want it for the broilers. In other poultry operations, the poop is a burden, whereas for us, it's a tool to regenerate soil. Our system of farming is nature enhancing. If you had a bird's eye view of our farm, you would see exactly where the chickens' coops have been. And the idea is that if your soils are healthy, your pasture is healthy, your animals are healthy, we're healthy, and the planet is healthy.
Agroforestry is the practice of either agriculture in forestry systems or forestry in agricultural systems, so that trees and crops are on the same piece of land for long periods of time. Farmers are able to produce diverse portfolios of food, allowing them to make more income rather than when they are relying on just one crop or one enterprise.
What we're standing in here are actually tunnels that used to grow flowers, and only 2 years ago it was just bush. Lots of weeds, very overgrown, and not much life. It's just amazing that you can bring that all back within less than 2 years. We decided to set up agroforestry because we wanted a food production system that produces superior quality, enhances soil and sequesters as much carbon as possible, and enhances, of course, biodiversity. It was was really when we first went to Brazil and discovered the advantages of syntropic agroforestry over any other agroforestry. We realized a lot of the crops that they were using in Brazil are also in Africa. And so we knew we could do it here and just slightly change it ever so slightly just to fit into the local context. So if you can imagine in a natural forest, you've got lots of different levels. You've got your canopy crops, you've got your emergent above that, you've got your sub-canopy, and then you've got your ground level stuff. In some circumstances, you've even got stuff growing under the ground. And that's what we're strongly mimicking in a system like this. In syntropic agroforestry, everything is planted at the same time, be it from seed or from seedling.
You start planting trees and other crops that begin to grow slowly and helping each other. Fast growers begin to diversify the system and produce food at the onset of the systems.
So you've got a continuously self-propagating family of plants that build the soil for you.
The difference between our tamale and the neighbors is very evident. Our neighbors, the lands are bare, or just one monocrop all the way. If it's dry season, it's just dry that way. But in our system, it's always green, always bushy. In Tamale, we are living in a food forest.
Even if it's just a normal tomato, if you taste it, it's not just juicy, but it has some flavor. It doesn't really matter what it is. If you taste it, it's really yummy.
We've been harvesting very superior quality produce from the farm. We started with families, but now we are at the online shops. We've been selling to restaurants, also locally in Nanyuki and Nairobi. And we are also selling our farm produce to some shops in Mombasa too.
The end goal is to be able to consistently supply those big urban markets because that's part of the circular vision of this farm.
As chefs, it's our duty to source our food from producers who are really looking after the environment. And I can tell you from a chef's point of view, this is where it starts. This is where you start building flavor. And more you'll see customers push back and actually demand that their food comes from responsible sources.
The future has got food and feed for everyone. We should not just think about ourselves. We are part of nature. We need to have a stable agricultural system in which we're able to store a lot of carbon in the soil to produce healthy food for human beings and other parts of the ecosystem, and therefore get on a path of growth that is based on the wider concept of circular economy.
It should be clear by now that businesses have a significant role to play in regenerating nature and addressing biodiversity loss. Let's hear again from Cindy on how businesses can use the circular economy as an approach to tackle biodiversity loss.
So I think we're hearing more and more commitments from different businesses, in light of our growing knowledge on the root causes of biodiversity loss. And I think my question now is, how do we change from ambition to action? How can businesses act towards achieving their circular economy goals and also reducing biodiversity loss in their operations?
Yeah, absolutely. Businesses have a very central role to play in all of this. While the exact things that you do will depend a little bit on which industry you're in, what part of the value chain you occupy, there are kind of 3 steps that we think any business can really do now to start moving into that action space from that ambition. And the first of those is really just assessing what are your current impacts and dependencies on biodiversity and setting targets based off of that. And a crucial part of this will really be taking a whole supply chain view. So you need to think about where are your impacts on nature, not only in your direct operations, but also upstream and downstream. And, we have examples like Kering in the fashion world, for instance. They've developed an environmental profit and loss tool in which they can look at their whole supply chain and assess what their impact is on things like water use, land use, greenhouse gas emissions. And based off of that, they identify what are the areas that they need to intervene to have the greatest impact on biodiversity. And, once you've set those clear targets, then the next step really is seeing what are the circular economy intervention points and levers that you can use to achieve those ambitions. So Schneider Electric is another company who did a similar exercise. They found out that one of their biggest impacts on nature is in their natural resource extraction for their products. And so what they ended up doing was they came up with a retrofit solution for some of their electrical equipment called EcoFit. And with that, they're able to replace certain components of their product to upgrade it rather than having to take the entire product back and send a new one to the client. So that's been able to reduce significantly their pressure on natural resource extraction, but also cut costs for their clients because they don't need to replace the entire system. And once all of those things have been done, we can also take this broader systemic view. So how can you collaborate with others to drive that system level change? And that's, across your supply chain, but also with different stakeholder groups and with different industries even. So, a fashion industry company might think about how can I do regenerative agriculture for my cotton, but at the same time, many in the food industry are thinking about that same thing. And so how can we kind of build these mutually beneficial relationships where actually we're learning from each other and really contributing to reaching the same goal together? That would be important.
I see. I really like how you've said mutually beneficial relationships. And I'm thinking, I know we're talking about businesses and what they can do right now, but I'm also now thinking about the policy environment. And because policy is really important in businesses being able to do these things, I'm thinking, so what can we get from policymakers to make this able to happen?
Yeah. So I think for policymakers, it's also different levels where we'd really need their engagement. On an international level, we want to see the circular economy being recognized more as a tool, really, to be able to achieve a lot of the biodiversity ambitions and address the really fundamental causes of biodiversity loss. So we talk about the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, which is being developed right now. That's supposed to set internationally a goal of how are we all collectively going to be working towards turning the tide on biodiversity loss. And in the first draft of that document, we already see mentions of, the need to change production systems, the need to change consumption, but it's missing still the how. And so really getting that circular economy language into that type of documentation would be really important in driving its adoption.
As we've heard, there are 3 main steps that businesses can take to address biodiversity loss. First, businesses need to understand the impact that they have on nature and how much they rely on it to operate. Second, businesses can adopt circular economy strategies that help them meet their biodiversity ambitions. Finally, businesses can stimulate collaboration within and outside of their value chain. Though business transformation is a key ingredient of the changes we urgently need, a conducive policy framework internationally and nationally is vital to bringing about transformative change. Businesses and policymakers must work together to address the underlying causes of biodiversity loss with a circular economy approach. To learn more about what businesses can do, check the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's website and read the paper, The Nature Imperative, How the Circular Economy Can Tackle Biodiversity Loss, and browse over 50 case studies. Thank you for watching the Circular Economy Show. You can catch up on any episodes that you've missed on our website and subscribe to or follow us on our channels to stay up to date. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.